Hockey O'Clock.
Die Tribüne erhebt sich und die Halle in Linz bebt ein erstes Mal. Linz schlägt zu! Das ist unglaublich, was die Blackwings hier zelebrieren.
Flying High, ein Unibet Hockey O'Clock Spezial. It is already the third week of Flying High, and it is another time that we have an English-speaking guest on the show revisiting that championship season of Linz in 2011 and 2012. And this time it is one of the most, renowned and still most loved imports that has ever played in Linz. It is, of course, no other than Pat Leahy. And Pat, first of all, so glad that you take the time and you want to talk extensively about that miracle of a season.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you. And, I think about that season, often, probably more often than I should, but, being 10 years, it seems like it's been the blink of an eye. But I'm excited to chat with you a little bit and reminisce and have some fun.
One thing that we have to settle beforehand, because when talking to people about you, about your impact as regards the Linz program and everything else, I heard probably 13 different ways of your last name being pronounced. Let's settle this once and for all. It's Pat
Leahy. No, I'm just kidding. It's Leahy, but I think from literally the first day I got into Linz, the first time the fans cheered my name, I think I had an assist or something, or maybe a penalty in the first preseason game I played. And they announced my name and the crowd chanted it like 3 or 4 times. And that's how they said it. They said Leahy. And hey, who am I to tell them otherwise? As long as they're chanting your name, that's a good thing. So, but yeah, that was fun. And ironically, on one of the first bus trips, I remember we were playing cards. This is my first year in Linz, and Christian Pertaler was behind me, and he was trying to tell me that it was my turn to go because I couldn't see him, and he kept saying, "Pete, Pete," and I was like, and then he finally tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, "Pete, you're up." I'm like, oh, I was like, "My name's Pat." He's like, "Yeah, Pete." And so then literally from that day, my nickname in Linz was Pete instead of Pat. So I lost both of my names.
But eventually, I'd say a lot of fans figured out what your name really is because of the many assists, because of the many goals that you had with Linz. And you had like individual success fairly early in your career in Linz, sustained success throughout the years. And you got very close in the 09-10 season when you lost in 6 games in the finals against Salzburg. And at an advanced stage of your career, losing a final and having gone through the same experience at the start of the century, at what point did you start thinking about, man, am I ever going to win a championship?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember my first year pro. I ended up at the end of the season, I was playing with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers in the American Hockey League. And it was my first year. I didn't know any better. And we ended up making it to the Calder Cup finals. And it was a great run. We ended up losing to Chicago in 5 games. But I remember thinking, like a lot of athletes, you're like, oh, get here, I'll be back. And never got back past a conference championship overseas. And then came to Linz, and we were kind of up and down the first year or two, and then we had that run in, I think it was 09, and yeah, it was amazing. And we had that comeback against Vienna. We were down 3-0. Was that in the conference in the semis, and we ended up that we had all the momentum going against Salzburg in the final. We won the first 2 games. And we were feeling good, but I think at the end of the day, I think we ran out of gas a little bit. And yeah, that one hurt. I mean, I felt like we were on a roll. We had a great team, a lot of character, top to bottom. And then the next year we kind of faltered a little bit. But then we kind of had a change into the guard a little bit on as far as the roster was concerned that in the 11th season, and it just kind of clicked right from the start. You could tell it was a good chemistry with the team, the coaching staff. Rob Dahm coming in kind of changed the attitude a little bit, definitely changed the systems and held everybody to a high level of attention to detail. And it was just a fun season, start to finish. You knew it was going to be something special. Just didn't know exactly how it was going to end.
I'll get to the season in much more detail, but because of the fact that there are two things that always get mentioned after championships have been won or finals have been conducted, that there might be a championship hangover or a finals hangover. And for example, recent American football history might suggest that there's a considerable chance that as a Super Bowl participant who doesn't win the final ends up having a bad year thereafter, a finals hangover, because of the fact that you'd never gone through a championship hangover up in your career to that point. Was the 2010-2011 year of the Blackwings that they had a classic case of a finals hangover?
No, I don't think so. I think everybody was excited certainly to win, and we came back with high expectations the next year also. I think that the championship hangover it's different because in the Austrian league where we play, you still had essentially a pretty full off season in terms of getting prepared for the next year. I think when you're talking American football, it's a little bit different just because their season, and even like the NHL, when you're playing 4 7-game series potentially, and you're adding 2.5 months onto your season, it gets a lot smaller that off season, and your time to recuperate, injuries, relax your mentally. That's a little bit more. I could see that creeping in. I don't think that was the case for us. I just think that, just for whatever reason that we didn't click as much that year, and that's the way the puck bounces sometimes.
Now, you already provided a great story about your first encounter with Rob Dahm 2 weeks ago, where you told listeners that he was the first coach to ever call you during the offseason, even though you hadn't met to that point yet. You also mentioned earlier on this conversation that he changed the attitude in Linz. In what regards did he change the attitude?
Well, I mean, again, he coming from North America, he had a specific vision and a way that he wanted to run the team, not only from a personality or a roster standpoint, but just the day-to-day operations, off ice preparation, chalk talk, going over systems, and then definitely translated onto the ice as well. His systems were very intricate, and I don't know if not necessarily people see it on the outside. A lot of times, you have traditional coaches, you'll have 2 or 3 forechecks, 2 or 3 breakouts, and that's about it. With him, it was I remember it was tough in the beginning. I'm like, we got to get on this, because he wrote us pretty good in the beginning, but it was to make sure we got it down. But there was 8-10 different systems that we would run, and sometimes we'd have a game plan for a specific team, and at the end of the first period it might get scrapped because it wasn't working, and he pulls a card out of his back pocket. He's like, we're doing this, and all the stuff that he seemed to do, we took it to heart. We worked hard at it. We prepared, and it showed on the ice. But he definitely held the players to a higher standard, like I said, in terms of work ethic, preparation, being mentally strong, and all of that translated over into our play on the ice for the most part.
The offseason after the quarterfinal loss against Villach in Linz not only brought a changing of the guard on the bench as regards the head coach, but also the changing of the guard as regarded a lot of veterans. Purdy, Shearer, Cashman, all were let go. Was that necessary, or did you think some of the veterans would have still fit with what Rob Dahm was doing?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking those guys. Those are all three great players. I know Reed wasn't here as long, but I mean, Shearsy and Purds were just. I mean, they could play in any system under any coach. That's no doubt. I think at the end of the day, that's hockey. Sometimes things run their course, and if at the end of the day, if you don't win, things change. And it was sad to see them go. I mean, I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't, a little upset at that. But at the end of the day, it's a business, it's a profession, and it's a job, and you gotta kind of let it go day at a time and move forward. And we brought in the guys we brought in were definitely younger, hungry, just very skilled players. And then, like I said before, it just top to bottom, we just had a good, well-rounded mix, and I think that that contributed a big deal to that championship run.
Now, during your 7 years in Linz, you saw a lot of import players come and a lot of import players go. And just in that season, not only in that season, but what I'm always interested in, when a new player, a new import comes into the locker room, you being one of the leaders of the team, what kind of traits are you looking for? What are the things that you're trying to figure out first? How he behaves, how he says hello, what he first tells of himself, or are these more on ice specific things that you're looking for?
No, I mean, usually your first interaction with any new player or any player, coming into a new season it's not on the ice, it's off the ice, it's in the locker room, at a meeting, it's at the place where you live, or at a restaurant or something. I mean, I think that we all look at on ice performance as that's the product, that's the team, that's the results, and it is. But it goes well beyond that. I think that in terms of what I would look for initially is, besides a firm handshake, is just look them in the eye and just know that they're going to have your back, and you can get a sense of that from most players pretty quickly. I think that at the end of the day, if they're good locker room guys, that translates over onto the ice. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be in terms of goals and assists, or saves or whatever. It goes to that mentality, that overall team chemistry, and if that's working in the locker room, more often than not on the ice, it translates into wins, and that's what matters.
Now, Rob Daum made a good first impression on you. By the way, he very vividly remembers that very first conversation that you two had on the phone, which he told two weeks ago here on this Unibet Hockey O'Clock special podcast. But as regards the new players that came in that year, who, for which reason, made a first impression on you?
I think that I would say that the three that and Keller wasn't right in the beginning, but Justin Keller was, when he came in, he was a long-haired, smooth, very low-key guy, really nice, really quiet. But then on the ice, he turned it up to a new level and just really cranked it up in his speed and everything. But from the start of the year, I mean, it would have to be Wiedemann and Ehrman. I mean, those two, they would play off each other. They're characters. They're funny. They kept everything. Everything was a laugh with them. And even on the ice, even if in practice or games, anything happens, they always came back to the bench with a smile on their face. And I think that was very noticeable for right from the start.
I'd imagine you being one of the not only leaders of the locker room, but probably the leader among the pranksters. How much of a fun infusion to the locker room was necessary this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day that's what the training camp is for. You kind of see on paper who the team added. The players that were already there, and you're coming in from the off season, and you're going to have a couple days. You get in a couple days early to kind of meet and greet some of the new guys. You have some team bonding, maybe some beers, go out for dinner. That's where you really create those relationships. And then it extends all throughout training camp where you're putting in all the hours, ahead of time before you see any results on the ice. But that's the same thing. Those after those 2-a-days in training camp, and then you're going for dog walks, or you're going to restaurants with the rest of the team, or some of the young guys. You're getting to know some of these guys, who they are, who their families are. Do they have kids? Do they have brothers, sisters? That's where all those relationships are established right from the start.
Still, a lot of new players coming in, and then that same intact Austrian core. How did the mixing and mashing go, and how did you kind of oversee everything that went on from training camp to the start of the regular season?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the core of that team was you notice it right from the start. And I mean, especially if we're talking Austrians, you got up front, it's got to be Gregor and Phil Lucas. And then I'd even put in, Danny Oberkofer in there. He was he'd been there for a long time. He was a younger guy, but he was a veteran on the team and brought a lot of experience. And then on the back end, Bobby Lucas was a different type of leader. He's a special personality. Some people like him, some people hate him. We got along really well, which was awesome, and we kind of had a back and forth relationship, which was great. We were able to joke with each other, and kind of it was a give and take, and I love that about Bobby. But at the end of the day, when you're talking Bobby Lucas, didn't matter if you liked his over the top work ethic or whatever. You knew that on the ice he was giving 100%. And Mickey Meyer too. He was another guy who'd been there for a long time, and even though he didn't play as much as some of the other guys, he dressed every game. He was always there. He was going to battle. But those core Austrian guys that had been there for a while really kind of were the glue, because myself was there, Frank McDonald was there, but a lot of that was basically like the older sort of imports, and then we brought in a lot of new guys. That's where you got to kind of make sure that the team mixes together well. And we were able to do that, where we had, a bunch of Austrians, a bunch of imports, and we were able to come together as a team and kind of work together, and it worked out really well.
A lot of new players that need to be implemented in a whole new system, various different systems for different opponents, as you've already mentioned. At what point were you able to say, okay, I've got it all down now? Now it's not only react or reacting to things, now it's acting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, you go out there, you put your systems in, you start playing, but at the end, when you get out there, it's the coaches can put the systems together as much as they want, but it's the players going out there and getting the job done and implementing that as best we can. And sometimes you got to improvise. Like I said earlier, the system might not work, or another team's throwing a wrinkle at you that we hadn't anticipated. But I think that the coaching staff with Suxi and Dahmer, they were always prepared to make those in-game adjustments as we needed. And as players, like I said, we worked very hard off the ice and in practices to make sure that if that happened or we needed to scrap a game plan, that we were going to be ready and for whatever we needed to. And more often than not that season, we were able to come through.
And that's one of the key points from game one onwards. Linz got on a roll and kind of never looked back. At what point did you personally go like, whoa, okay, there could be something special brewing here?
Yeah, I mean, you could tell, like you said, you could tell right from the beginning that the team had good chemistry. But you never know if that's going to translate over into wins and losses. But like you said, we went out and got off to a pretty hot start, and we didn't look back. And I mean, in terms of when I knew, you never like to look too far ahead, But I think when we were maybe like a week or two away from the end of that first, 40 games or whatever it was, and you looked at the standings and we had a pretty good cushion. You didn't know if I was going to translate into a championship, but you're like, we've had a pretty good run so far here. And we just, on our mindset was just, we got to keep it going. Especially when you reset the points like that. That was something that kind of threw a wrinkle into the year, because you could have such a great first 40 games, and then all of a sudden it comes down to those 10 games, and it's real short sample. And if you don't play well, which we didn't play great in that play-in round, I think we were just over 500, but we were able to get, keep that number one seed, which we, at the end of the day was really big for us getting home ice.
Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, first of all, congratulations on a great memorization of everything that happened. It was indeed 40 games, and you finished those 40 games with an 8-point cushion. Back in the day, of course, only 2 points per win, as is still the case in the National Hockey League. One thing that not only the Unibet statisticians had a look at, but also some other people pointed out during that year, you always played on a line, when playing, of course, with Mike Ouellet and Gregor Baumgartner. At what point was this kind of an arranged marriage, so to speak, that you, when you were healthy, were always playing with those guys? Was that something that had been discussed in training camp, or did that just come up during the season?
Well, I think that when you come into the season, the coaches kind of probably have on their chalkboard in their rooms, like, these are our expected lines and what we think will happen. But at the end of the day, in training camp, you feel it out. You're playing with different guys, seeing what works, what clicks, what worked the year before might not work this year. But I think right from the beginning, Ouellet and I kind of really connected, especially on the penalty kill and 4-on-4. And Bomber and I we knew each other really well, and we play the offsides. So that worked out really well. And like you said, we just clicked. We played really well. We were able to, keep that offensive attitude while also playing well defensively. I think that we were a line that played strong at both ends of the ice, and teams knew that. A lot of times we would end up playing against, the other team's top line, maybe not so much for offense, but for defense. But that was good. I mean, Ouellet was he's a really smart player. Had a really good head on his shoulders for the game. Great face-off man. And it was great.
Now I have to ask listeners to bear with me on this one, because the question's a little longer than usual, and I tend to ask long questions anyways. But what does it say about the constitution of the line and the roles on your line when I point out the following, again taken from Unibet stats? The line goals that year are as follows: Leahy 13, Ouellet 25, Baumgartner 31. The penalty minutes on that line goes as this: Leahy 52, Ouellet 20, Baumgartner 16. What does it say about the line?
Well, it says that those guys were better goal scorers than I was that year. I know I missed a couple games with a broken thumb and a foot in the same. Like, I think I got them shifts apart in the same game. But in terms of penalty minutes, yeah, I mean, it depends. Those guys. I don't know if they necessarily win the Lady Byng Trophy for sportsmanship either, but I wasn't afraid to. I wasn't necessarily a fighter per se, but if, I would scrap a little bit if needed. And, I've tried to play a physical game, and sometimes that means you're going to get a few strafminuten.
I'll leave it at that. We're going to take a quick break, and then we talk about a couple of ups and downs in that year, and of course about the ultimate high, which is winning the championship here on Flying High, a special to the Unibet Hockey O'Clock podcast.
Unibet Hockey O'Clock.
Flying High wird euch in den nächsten 10 Episoden mit den besten Geschichten rund um die Blackwings 2011-2012 versorgen. Aber auch eure Anekdoten wollen und sollen gehört werden. Schickt eure Erinnerung, eine Episode oder ein kleines Ereignis mit der letzten Linzer Meistermannschaft an unibethockeyoclock@gmail.com. Das ist unibethockeyoclock@gmail.com. Die besten Einsendungen werden dann in einem ganz besonderen Rahmen verlesen und gewürdigt. Und unter allen Einsendungen werden insgesamt 10 Unibet Hockey O'Clock T-Shirts verlost.
Unibet Hockey O'Clock.
Back on Flying High, back with none other than Pat Leahy. Pat's already been a great first part talking to you about getting on a roll with the Blackwings of the 2011-2012 season. And then again, people were still brought in. People still had to leave the team. We already talked about Justin Keller. We have to talk at some point about Jan-Axel Alavaga. Did you ever think, okay, we still need reinforcements? Or did you at some point go like, okay, no, this could really already be a championship winning team?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in the locker room that we had, the guys that we had in there, we felt like we had what it took to win. But that's, the job of adding small pieces. What you think might be a small piece at the time might turn into a huge piece. And it did. I mean, you look at Keller, he played really well for us, solidified that top line with Ehrman and Heisey. And then, at the end, adding Olivara, a seasoned veteran defenseman, brings a little bit of scoring punch. Those are the types of pieces that coaches and management add that make the difference. And sometimes they can backfire, sometimes not. Obviously, in this case, it was great. I know Axie had a big goal in that game against Klagenfurt in the final. And he was just a veteran guy too, so he brought a whole nother level of winning culture too. So
just to point one thing out, and that's probably pumping up your tires a little bit. When healthy and when Leahy, Willett, and Baumgartner were playing together, that was always the first line on Rob Dahlm's game sheet. So it's nice of you awarding credits to another first line, but there you go. History's proven it.
I appreciate that. No, but I mean, at the end of the day, we knew that either one of those, top two lines could be the top line, and sometimes we needed them to be, the top line that night, and maybe they were having an off night. We knew we needed to pick it up. I felt like there was some good balance there between those two lines. I mean, that Keller, Ehrman, and Heisey were so explosive. Offensively, they were creative. They were able to do things that not a lot of lines could do. And like I said, Bomber and Ouellette and I, we were able to chip in offensively, and we could do it in bunches. I think we were counted maybe a little bit more on the defensive side sometimes for a big face-off because Ouellette was really good on draws, blocking shots, things like that. So it was just a good balance and a good complementary lines there.
For you personally, it was a down year as regards your health. Just to put things into perspective, first 4 years in Linz, you missed 4 out of a possible 256 games. That's 1.5% of all the games. Then, in that order, you missed 17 games in 11-12, 11 games in 12-13, and 12 games in 13-14. Was it just bad luck, or is there more to it that you missed a lot of games in the latter half of your Blackwings career?
Getting old.
Is it that simple?
Yeah, no. The game that I play, a lot of times I'm blocking shots, and that's something that I did over here in North America. And I remember Philly Lucas, he picking my brain. He got really, really good at penalty killing and blocking shots, but that's something that I always did over here. And maybe it wasn't as common, in Austria, but it, unfortunately, sometimes when you're doing that a lot and you're putting yourself in front of the puck, some bad things can happen. And, I've broken fingers, broken feet, And when that happens, there's nothing you can do. I tried to pride myself at least on not getting too many muscle injuries. But again, even that, you get old, sometimes those things happen. So, but yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing for a player is to be sitting on the sideline when you're hurt and you know that you just want to get out there and help the team.
Now, as you've already kind of teased listeners a little bit, you were already talking about your thumb injury that you had that year. A lower body injury that you had that year happened in the same game?
Yeah. How many games did we miss?
17 that year.
Maybe the lower, I don't know. But I don't know if they were all in the same stretch. I can't remember that. But no, but yeah, I broke my foot on a shot. I blocked 2 or 3 shots at the end. Who were we playing? I want to say I think it was Salzburg. I think Tratnik hit me with like a shot or two, like in the same shift, and I ended up cracking a bone in my foot. And then I was right at the end of the second period, and then I remember we went in and somebody was ribbing me, like joking around, like, "You're gonna block shots or whatever," and then the first shift of the third period, I went out and took one off the thumb, and I was like, "Okay, I'm done. This is done. I got to get off the ice."
But there's one missed game that I'd say has to be the best missed game of the year. Do you remember that?
I do remember that one. Yeah, that was when my son Vaughn was born. That was mid-January. That was a tremendous day. And it was awesome to be able to spend that, with my wife and newborn son. And I wouldn't trade that for the world. I'd take that game off any day.
Obviously, a lot of personal highs and downs. And of course, listeners of this podcast, and especially long-term listeners, already know that you and Phil Lucas were close, are still close. Also because of your contributions to the Phil Lucas special and Bobby Lucas special that can still be heard here on Unibet Hockey O'Clock. It was an interesting year for Phil personally because he went from number 1 center to 4th line centerman. How did you see that evolution or devolution?
Well, I mean, Phil's the ultimate professional. You guys know that. I know that. He's one of my best friends. I think that, on the surface, I think it anytime you don't play as much as you want to play or you think you should play, it's a motivating factor. But it can also be frustrating at times. And, I had the benefit of rooming with Phil on the road, and we hung out all the time when we were, in Linz. And, I was a sounding board for him. We got to chat through a lot of different things that year. But, at the end of the day, he was the captain of that team. He was the leader of that team. And he, as much as I know he wanted to play 30 minutes a night, he didn't let that affect him one bit. He went out, he did his job when he was on the ice. He did it to the best of his ability. He led that team by example. And I don't think we would have been in a position to win like we would have if he wasn't on that squad.
We're talking about a great regular season that concluded with you being in first place, and then an up and down intermediate round that was quote unquote just for the seeding in the top half for the Black Wings. How did you personally try to motivate yourself for games that weren't meaningful for the standings?
Yeah, I mean, well, in that second round or the play-in round, it was a really weird situation because we came out of the first 40 games and, like you said, we were, had an 8-10 point lead. That's a pretty significant cushion going into the end of the season, and then all of a sudden that gets shrunk down to 1 point. It almost makes those, even though you're guaranteed to get into the playoffs, it made all those games pretty stressful. They were pretty important points. And like we didn't play our best hockey. I think you ask anybody on the team. I don't think it was a question of kind of coasting into the playoffs but we for whatever reason, we lost our edge And I think in the last game or two, we were kind of, focusing to get that back heading into playoffs. And, we kind of used that as a motivating factor, being like, hey, we got to turn this around, or else, we could be the number one seed, or you can still be one and done if you don't come out and play the way you can play. But I think that we were able to do that.
And right around that time, after you didn't lose a game or two games in a row for a very long time, and that was, of course, Rob Damm's mantra. Still, right around the start of the intermediate round, where no one was necessarily looking for a turning point with the Blackwings. Nowadays, if you talk to a lot of former players and coaches, they say one of the turning points of the season was that Jan Axel Alavaga was brought in. In what regard was it indeed a turning point as regards the locker room and as regards the season that unfolded thereafter?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, he like I said before, he's a veteran guy, brought a lot of experience, and he brought that a little bit of offensive firepower from the blue line on the defensive side that we needed really to shore up the power play a little bit. And I think that was evident. He was able to kind of play a steady game, move the puck. But yeah, I mean, I think that he really solidified that decor, and especially those special teams units that are really key, especially in the playoffs.
It's kind of fitting that you are here 1 week after Martin Gabermeier talked about the championship year, and he talked extensively about how it felt, how the entire air was let out of the arena in Linz after game 1 against Vienna. And then it goes to an already incredibly important game 2 in Vienna. Just like game 1, of course, game 2 goes into overtime. And I'm just wondering, do you remember what you said during that overtime intermission to Martin Gabermeier?
No, you'll have to tell me.
He just said, do it again. Just like a couple of years back when he kind of initiated that huge comeback in the semifinal series. Apparently, you already told him something, and you then 2 years later just told him, do it again. And what did he do? Did it again.
He did. I remember that OT goal he scored against Vienna back in it was in our barn. It was a huge goal for us. And then, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sure I said it to him, and I think that he was a guy that, some people would say he wouldn't have picked him to score the winner, but he was a guy that was so fast, so shifty, nobody could cover him, and that was such a big goal for us to turn that around, and really kind of got us going in the right direction.
Having gone through a lot of playoff success, but also playoff disappointment, you lead Vienna 3-1, and then you let him come back into the series. Was there ever a point where you're like, oof, not again?
Yeah, I mean, always. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it just more, when you let a team back in a series, if anybody tells you they don't think about it, they're lying. I think that by no means did we think the series was over, or were we going to lay down. But it's a gut check time when that happens, and you have the series pretty much wrapped up at 3-1, and now you're sitting 3-3. That's like, hey, we're do or die and number one seed, and we knew we had to come out and just and get that win and move on. And if we did that, then I think we would be able to get our game back on track. And but Vienna was a good team. They had a lot of good players, and that's playoff hockey. That's you're not going to get many walkthroughs where you're winning 4-0 and you win every game by 5 goals. That was an exciting series, for the fans. Like, a little stressful probably, but overtime games, close games, hard fought, physical. That's why they were a big rival of ours. And my whole time there, we always had pretty tough games with Vienna.
Then again, one might wonder if the hardest series for you personally would be the semifinal series. You missed 4 of the 5 games against Ljubljana. How hard was it to watch and not being able to contribute in that series?
Yeah, like I said, I touched on before. I mean, anytime you're sitting on the sidelines, and you're injured for whatever reason, you just want to be out there and helping the team any way you can. And it's, when things are going well for the team, that's great. You're like, okay. But anytime like you'd lose a game or, there's not playing well, it would wear on you a little bit. You're like, I got to get back out there. I got to get back quicker, faster. But, unfortunately sometimes you can't rush back from injuries or it's just going to make it worse. But, it was nice to see the team perform and get through that series. What was it? 4-1, I think. But, yeah, I mean, that was, we always had tough games with them as well. The travel plays into it with that series too. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if I'm on the sidelines or on the ice. If we win, that's enough for me.
When you had to miss those 4 games, how did you try to handle it? Spend as much time in the locker room, just being a regular among the guys? Did you go for the stands? Did you go for something in between?
No, I mean, I think you want to be around the guys still as much as you can. You're part of the team. You're going in for treatment and different things like that. But at the, when you get closer to, games and things like that, you're not as involved just because you don't want to be a distraction at all. If you're in there talking with guys and you're taking their attention for whatever reason at all away from the game and the task at hand, you don't want that. So I found that during the day, during practices, all that, I was just as much a part of it. But when it comes game time, you take a step back and let the guys that are actually going to be on the ice focus and get the job done.
Obviously, you came back for a Game 5, a convincing 5-2 affair against Ljubljana. You moved on to the semis to the finals, pardon me, the same day as Klagenfurt moved on from its semi-final series, and everybody knew there would be an entire week between Game 5 and Game 1 of the finals. How hard was it to keep focused, to keep not only the attention span, but everything else that goes with it high for this entire week?
Yeah, it's tough because, and I'm sure it was the same way for Klagenfurt. You're coming off a series win and you're feeling good about yourself and you're feeling good about the team. And you just want to get back out there and start playing again and keep the train rolling. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, both sides knew you had a week in between. The biggest thing for that week was getting out of that week healthy. You didn't want to have anybody getting hurt in practice, fluke things. You're trying to take care of yourself off the ice, on the ice. But at the same time, you had to keep your conditioning up. You had to keep working hard, keeping sharp, keeping everything, because you didn't lay flat and, going into that finals. But yeah, anytime there's a layoff, it's really tough.
During that playoffs, and obviously that includes the finals, and I'm trying not to spoil it too much, but here's a little spoiler alert. You only scored 1 goal, but that ties into a little trivia question, the third one that's being asked on this podcast. Why is it important? Because people back home can win one of these rare season DVDs of the Black Wings in 2011-2012. He or she who answers the most trivia questions correctly will enter the raffle, and of course will be among maybe the one person that gets lucky and gets eventually drawn to win this DVD and a couple of other prizes, obviously. That 1 goal in the playoffs of 2011 and 2012 helped bring in your total up to 149 goals in your Black Wings career. Is that a number that you would have had coming from the top of your head, or would you have had to think and count all the goals together?
I would have no idea. No, no. I was fortunate enough to play with a lot of great players, some really, really good teams, and yeah, I mean, scoring goals is fun. I mean, that's the name of the game. You can't score if you don't win.
Those 149 goals scored as a member of the Black Wings, and that's a fact for you, are still the most an American-born player in league history has scored. So hats off to that. But the trivia question still is coming. 149 goals, all scored for the Black Wings. Where does this rank in Black Wings team history? Please send the right answer to unibethockeyoclock@gmail.com and only to unibethockeyoclock@gmail.com. The procedures of this raffle, of this DVD giveaway, all in the show notes, as is the time code of the trivia question. Hopefully a lot of people will try to answer it, and hopefully a lot of them are correctly answering it. Would you take a wild guess where you're ranking in team history?
What did you say? It was 149? Is that with playoffs, everything?
All together.
I would say... I don't know, 20th, 25th.
I can take one thing away from that. You're a lot better than 20th or 25 or 25th. So there's that. Please write answer to unibethockeyoclock@gmail.com. And we're trying to focus on the finals. We've had that 1 week delay, and you're leading the first two periods 2-1. Do you remember the locker room intermission, the second intermission that night?
Of game one? I think that, just being up 2-1, you just like close that game out. I think that was the idea. Obviously it didn't work out that way.
It didn't. And the interesting fact was that 2 goals were scored by the same KC player who normally wasn't a goal scorer in his career, Johannes Kirisits. And when you're just looking at the other team and players to neutralize and players to not make a play, and then you catching 2 goals from one of the bottom 3 defensemen. How did that one feel heading back into the locker room, knowing that Klagenfurt had just taken home ice?
Yeah, I mean, as far as, giving up goals it doesn't matter who scores the goals, whether they're, top end players or fourth line or whatever, you never want to give up goals. And, we were really hoping to close that game out. It's game one is huge, in a best of 7, especially on your home ice. But it was something that we just had to go back to the drawing board, get rid of it, move on to game 2. You can't change the past. I think, our focus was strictly on game 2 and coming out of that game with a win.
And it always sounds so easy getting back to the drawing board, fix a couple of things. And then with that foul taste of the first finals loss in your mouth, how were you able to rip off 4 in a row?
Well, again, it goes back to the character of what's in that locker room, starting from the coaching staff all the way down, forwards, D, and Westy played so well for us that year. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody thought we were going to win 4 straight. I think the focus was winning game 2, and then once we did that, the focus was on game 3. And it's one game, and I know it's cliche, but one game at a time is all you can do. And then all of a sudden we saw ourselves up 3-1 playing at home, and I think that the mentality going into that game is you don't want to go back to Klagenfurt. Let's finish this here.
Because that's something that we as media members always like to do, look back at series or on series again and just trying to look at turning points or where a series shifted. If you're looking back at that series, at that finals 10 years later, was there indeed a turning point? Was there an event for you personally where you thought, okay, now we've got all the momentum?
I remember when we were playing, was it game 3? Was it game 4 in Klagenfurt? Wiedemann scored a goal coming off the left side. He put it top. I think it was he Danny? I think it was Overcover passed to him, but I remember he put a short side upstairs on Chiodo, and I remember when he scored that, everybody was so excited. And that when that one went in, that made me feel really, really good about our chances, not only in that game, but kind of going back home and taking care of business at home.
And indeed, it was the game winner in finals game number 4, and you took care of business on home ice in game 5. And if you look at the league and everything that has unfolded ever since, the majority of teams had to win their championship on not their own ice. How important was it going into that game 5 to close out the series? How was how would you describe the mood in the locker room as regards taking care of business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we reflected back to that first series against Vienna, where again you're up 3-1. Let's put it away, and if you don't, and you give a team life and let them win a game, and all of a sudden it's 2, and then now you're in a game 7, and we definitely didn't want that. So I think that we reflected back to that. I think we said, listen, let's give our fans something to cheer about. Let's give ourselves something to be happy about, and let's go out there and win this game. And I think that, by the way we played, again, it was a 1-goal game. I mean, we scored the empty netter, but it was a 2-1 game, 1-goal game the last little while, and it was back and forth, and it was tight, and it was stressful. But I think you could tell the guys were laying it on the line because we wanted to end it right there.
The beginning of our conversation, I said at that start of the year of 2011, 2012, you were at an advanced stage of your career. You weren't the grizzled old veteran yet. You probably never were, but you were on the wrong side of your 30s. And when the people at the arena started counting down the game clock, at what point did it finally hit you? Fuck me, this is the championship I've so long been following, and now it's finally here.
Well, I was on the ice when the buzzer went, so I didn't even hear the countdown. Like when you're on the ice, all you're doing, it's 2-1. You're like, just by all means possible, keep that puck out of our net, because they pulled the goalie. They were pressuring us. Puck was bouncing. I remember Gregor and I were battling at the blue line trying to get the puck out, and it just kept hopping, and we couldn't get it out. And we just wanted to. The clock felt like it was in slow motion. And then we were able to get that puck, and he fired it down. And I don't think anybody cared that it went in. I think once the puck got outside of our blue line, we turned around and everybody just celebrated, and it was a tremendous feeling. It was my first championship since high school. Wow. I mean, even I look back on it today like it was yesterday. I remember it was so thrilling.
How much of the 48 hours that followed that empty net goal do you actively remember?
Not much. No.
How hard was the party?
The partying was great. The trophies came around with us all over the place, and I mean, I remember a lot from the rink, like the crowd coming on the ice. There was, probably 1,000 people on the ice. And I remember I was on the bench with one of those Magnum bottles of champagne and spraying it on everybody. And it was just a tremendous feeling. And, it was a great culmination of that season. All the guys had put in so much work and so much effort. And, it's not, every team does that, but only one team ends up, happy at the end of the year. And thankfully that season it was us.
When you talk to players, especially the ones who've won a championship, they always marvel at the journey, like the journey it is from the first day of training camp to finally hoisting that trophy. At what point did you properly have time to reflect that journey that you undertook with the team?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I think that for me personally, it was obviously all the celebrations on the ice was exhilarating, and you were so pumped and excited. Your trophies everywhere. It was amazing. But for me, I remember getting back into the locker room and sort of getting my top stuff off and just sat in my stall for a minute or two, just reflecting with a beer and just thinking about the season. And just kind of sat quiet for about a minute, looking around at everybody was yelling and screaming, and just knowing that it was the perfect end to a great season, and just how happy I was for the team to win that championship, and for myself too. It was, like I said, it was my first one, so I'm gonna cherish that one.
Being one of the longest tenured import players, not only on the Black Wings, but in the back at that time AB League, what did it mean for you personally, knowing the city of Linz, knowing the core Austrian players, knowing a lot of fans and everything that they bring to the table? What did it mean to finally get that championship back to Linz again?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was in Linz for 7 years, and it was, some of the best 7 years of my life. It was amazing. I met some great people, teammates along the way. But the city, they welcomed me right from the start. They made me feel at home, and I'm a creature of habit. I like comfort. When I felt like when I play my best when I know my surroundings, and I had some opportunities, a couple of times, just maybe to go and try some different opportunities hockey wise, but at the end of the day, it always came back to Linz, and I just liked my time there, and I loved the city, and it was comfortable, and they made me feel a part of it, and it became like a second home to me, and I'm looking forward to the next time I get back there.
I've asked this very same question at the end of every conversation so far, and probably will keep doing it up until the 10th and final part of the Flying High series. Is there a single favorite memory that always comes to your mind first when looking back on the season? A story, a prank, an episode that unfolded, or is it just the sum of the parts?
Well, I would say the parade after the season was amazing. I mean, there's a lot of stories. Some of them they're not made for radio. So I can't share those, but I remember just, starting on the bus at the rink and going on that whole parade through the city and ending up in the Hope Plots. And then, things got a little crazy, and there was some alcohol, and people, I remember Erman and I dancing on the stage with no shirts on. And it was, I remember Schultze was directing the crowd and getting them going. It was amazing. That parade, that'll stick with me for a while. I got some fun stories from that night.
And this parade, by the way, can be seen on that DVD that I just mentioned, that can still be won at the end of this 10-part series. Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a blast, and hopefully it's an equally big blast for Black Wings fans, kind of reminiscing in some great memories.
Yeah, thank you for the time. I appreciate it. And, it's been crazy. It's been 10 years, but it's been fun bringing up some of the memories of that season and that championship team. And, that all the guys on that team are champions forever because of that year. And it was amazing. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Many, many more great memories to come already a week from now, when it's part 4 of Flying High here on Unibet Hockey O'Clock.
Unibet
Exzellente Unterhaltung mit dem schönsten Sport der Welt.
Unibet Hockey O'Clock.